that you don't need to be a computer science 4-year, major and have studied 16 programming languages and all this stuff about site configuration and database management and all these things. We're just building a bridge. We're just building a bridge to show you that you can start doing even the simplest things and build simple applications, just knowing a couple tools. Yeah, so let's get into the HTML first. Okay, what is HTML? If you ever heard that, it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. What it does is it defines, like Rich said, the skeleton of your website. It's the bone structure. It creates the components and what component comes first in your website. So HTML, fundamentally, the syntax is made of two components. The first is tags. Okay, so you'll hear that word a lot, tags. This is a tag. This little gray box here, you have this opening tag in between two angle brackets, those signs that you only use for math class. Now we're going to be using them all the time because they are in every tag. You have an opening tag, and then you have a closing tag over on the right here. And the closing tag has a / to tell us that it's closing. So basically what that means is anything in between these two tags, you could put some content here, you could put whatever you want, and that's what goes inside that element, okay? So one example of this that we might see on a website is called an H1 tag. That stands for header 1. Usually these things are used for titles, like page titles, big important text, right? If I put H1, and then here's the opening tag, and I put the word hello, and then I put the closing H1, that tells me we're done with the H1, close it off. This is what is going to be displayed on the screen. You'll see a nice big hello to the browser. All right. Now, do note the /. Sometimes there are a few exceptions we'll see today. Actually, the next example, there are some tags that close themselves, so they will actually look like an opening tag and just have a / at the end. Those are called self-closing, and we'll get to an example of that real quick. So I'm going to keep going here. Like I said, if you have any questions, please just hit the chat box up. We're going to keep powering through it. And if I need to reiterate something, please let me know. I'm trying to keep it very simple. And also, you're not going to remember everything I'm talking about. I can't reiterate that enough. This is just to whet your appetite. So the second component of an HTML script, right, is the attribute. Attributes contain additional information placed inside an opening tag. So maybe the tag, it needs some more information before the browser knows what to do with it. So here's one example of what that looks like. You can have an image, IMG, that stands for image tag, right? And notice this tag stays open all the way till the end here, and it self-closes. But if we just typed image and put the angle bracket, the browser doesn't know what the image is supposed to be. So here's where we use something called an attribute. So an attribute is immediately following the opening tag. And in this case, it's the source attribute, src. We need a source for our image. So we're just going to say src equals, and then in quotes, we define what we want the source of that image to be. So whether you're referencing maybe a URL for your image, or maybe you just have a local file that you want to serve. So in this case, I just have a file of a picture of my dog, and I want to show it on my website. So I put image source equals my dog, and that's going to show up on the website. So think about attributes like telling the tags what they're really made of. Not all tags have attributes, but a lot of them do. So if you can master those two things, tags and attributes, you've got HTML. That's it. So like I said, broad strokes here. We're going to put that aside for a second. We'll come back to it and show you more examples when we get to what's called the sandbox. We have some fun in the sandbox. So the next thing we're going to talk about at the Coding Den is CSS, cascading style sheets. I don't know where those doodles are coming from. Are you guys seeing that? It's like doodles appearing on my website, on my screen. I have no idea where they're coming from. So styling and decoration, like Rich said. What do I want the page to look like? How do I make it attractive for people? And these are the same sort of things that you use when you are building an app for a phone. You style them the exact same principles apply that we're going to be learning about. So one way that you can write CSS that we'll talk about today is called inline. And what that looks like is in the very same line as the tag, we're going to place a style attribute to the tag we wish to modify. So say I had an H1. Remember before the H1 that said hello, it was just black. But now we want the color to be blue. So we put style equals quotation marks. And in between, we set a property being color, right? Then we put a colon. And then we're going to assign that property a new value. In this case, blue. And then we end it with a semicolon. So every CSS statement is going to look exactly like this: property, value. And that's it. If you can grasp that, you can grasp the core of what CSS is, you can already do a lot of different things with your website. So in this example, we have a header 1. It's a blue heading, and we're changing the color to blue. And then underneath it, we have what's called a paragraph tag, abbreviated by the letter P. And we're going to change its style to the color red. So now it says a red paragraph. We close the tag, and that's how it looks. So I hope even just from this, you can see how simple it is to start digging in and customizing how the site looks. So the user experience that you give, right? Next, we'll talk about JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is really at its core a programming language, and W3 School calls it the programming language of the web. So your web browsers, Google Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge, whatever, Safari, they read JavaScript behind the scenes and interpret that JavaScript to be able to tell the web page to do things. So like Rich said before, it's the organs. It's how your body functions on the inside that makes things happen. And the reason that I like using JavaScript first too is when you can understand how it affects websites, it's really a great bridge into the world of programming in general. Because if you look at any other programming languages that you might have heard of, C#, C++, Python, PHP, if you went into any of those other languages, you're going to find the same exact principles of programming that you learn in JavaScript. Sometimes the syntax looks different. Sometimes the data is handled a little bit differently, but overall, it's a similar way to talk to a computer. So the beauty of learning it with websites is you can use JavaScript and start to get your hands dirty with real programming language, real coding. So what does it do? It manages website behavior. It allows your forms maybe to collect user input. So if you ever put your email on a sign-up form, you ever put your phone number in, that's JavaScript behind the scenes taking that data and sending it to a database somewhere where maybe your bank can get back to you now, right? You can change various elements of the website, not just what they look like, but what they actually are. You could shuffle things around, you can move things around. And you can also create games or applications. Most games and applications on websites they run on JavaScript behind the scenes. So there's a ton of things you can do with this, limitless possibilities. And we're going to teach you guys in the classes how to do things like make a calculator or how to, calculate your bill, maybe make a calendar, make a stopwatch, simple little apps to start. But eventually you can learn to build it out and build games even or other things depending on, what do you want to do with it, right? So that's an overview of what it does. This would be an example of how it looks in code. And we're going to see this all in action in just a few minutes here. Here's what JavaScript looks like in code. So in this example, I have a function. Okay, it's just defined by this keyword function. And here's its name. I just called it my function. Excuse me. Inside, don't worry too much about these parentheses right now. Inside these curly braces, we want the function to do something. I could say anything I want. I could say print out my name, print out Joe Sherrick. And if every time I called that function, it would print my name out. And that's how computers can do complex tasks very quickly. is called something called a function, right? And like I said, I can't reiterate this enough. This is a broad overview. I'm going to explain these things as best as I can when we get to the sandbox. If you're not understanding everything the first time, that is okay. It takes a little bit of time, but with a couple repetitions, you start to see these patterns emerge. And the point I want to get across is anyone can do this stuff. It takes a little bit of diligence, a little bit of studying, right? Anyone can do this, and you can make things happen real quick. It's fun. So the second part of this example is, you recognize this is actually an HTML tag, right? I have the opening. This is a button tag, and I want my button to do something when I click on it. So in order to tell the browser what to do, I have to give it an attribute called onClick. Now the onClick attribute is going to tell the button to execute my function every time it's clicked. So say I wanted to add a number. I just have the number 0. And on click, I want to add 1 to that number. Every single time I click on that button, the number jumps up by 1. Something like as simple as that could be an example of a JavaScript function. So like I said, if you guys have questions, please jump into the chat. If I got to reiterate something, let me know. I'm trying to keep this simple as I can, understandable as I can. If no questions yet, we're going to jump over to what's called a sandbox. Now, for all intents and purposes, think of it like an online playground. In the old days, you used to have to create all the website files locally. You'd have to get them configured, or if you're doing it on a live server, you'd have to pass all your files over to a live server, make sure all your ports are connected, all that other stuff. We don't have to worry about that stuff right now because we have modern technology. So people have actually built what's called a sandbox, where you can play around with HTML code and make it do, kind of give you like an instant preview of what your website might look like. And then throughout the classes, we'll talk about all that configuration and all that other stuff. But right now, we don't really need to worry about it. It's pretty great. So I'm going to jump over to the sandbox right now. Just give me 1 second. All right. This is, okay, so the sandbox that I picked for this presentation is called codesandbox.io. I do say if you want to follow along, feel free. If you want to open up codesandbox.io, I usually have someone ask me how to get it started. So I'll just show you real quick in a new window. If you go there for the first time, codesandbox.io, and I will just post that into the chat. Like I said, you don't have to follow along, and honestly, I don't recommend it, but someone usually wants to follow along, and that's why I'm doing this now. So you can go up to here, create a sandbox, and when that loads, you just go to create sandbox here, and this gives you some templates to work with. The one that I'll be looking at is this one that says static, and it has the orange number 5 here. That just opens up a static HTML file. And if you click on it, you'll see some boilerplate text that they put in there for you. All this is like the heading stuff for the website. We're not going to worry about any of this right now. All I want you to pay attention to, if you are opening a sandbox, is what's in between the body tags. Okay? So we're going to be working in between the opening and closing body tags. So all this space in here. And I had one other person ask me before, if things aren't changing, like say I want to change this H1 text and I just want to set it to hello. If things aren't changing for you over here, just make sure you go ahead and save it. You can press up here, File Save, or hit Control S, and that'll refresh your page. Okay. So like I said, you don't have to be doing this right now. I just want to get that out of the way. I'm actually going to open up a sandbox that I've been working on for a little bit. So this one here, like I said, it's got the same basic structure. We're going to be in between the body opening and closing tags. Now, a couple things, just so you know what's going on. You'll see some files over here. this is sort of like our mock file directory. You'll see the index.html file. That's the file that we're going to be working in to write the HTML code. And that's what's going to render onto this trial browser, if you will, on the right-hand side. So I can type something in between the body tags. I'll just type bracket h1 because I want a header 1. And I'm going to type hello world. Okay, it's a common thing you see. And notice I close the tag. I type angle bracket / h1, and that's how it knows I'm done with this title, right? So anytime you see an opening, look for the closing, right? Unless it's like we said, an image tag, which is self-closing. It's an exception. Oh, so many exceptions. It's like learning the French language, but I digress. So, all right, maybe next thing I want to show a header 2. So if header 1 is like the title of your page, maybe header 2 is like a subtitle or a subsection. So for now, I'm going to say, look at this cute panda, and I'm going to close the H2. All right, now you'll see it's a little bit smaller. Okay, now why did I say look at this cute panda? I do not see a panda here. That's why we need one. So I'm going to put, guess what, an image tag. So remember, the image tag is img. Now, image tags are self-closing, but the browser needs a reference, right? It needs to know what image am I showing. So once again, remember, I need an attribute. So I'm going to use the source attribute. I'm going to type src equals, and then I'm going to open some quotation marks. So anything I put in here is going to be rendered as an image over here. So for right now, I actually did this before. I took a picture of a panda from my computer and I dragged it to this directory. So I uploaded a panda here, and I just am going to take this exact file name and type it panda.jpg, and there it is, rendered on the screen. How do I know if something is self-closing? The self-closing tags they're really an exception to the rule. Images can be self-closing. Break tags can be self-closing. The more you use them, the more you learn about it. But for right now, for all intents and purposes, make sure you understand the concept of, if I have like text or something in the middle of it, like if I have to store something in it, I should close it after, right? If I just leave this open, then all of a sudden the browser has no idea when this header is supposed to end, right? And you can see how quickly things get messed up. So I hope that answers your question. We'll keep going here. So I have this picture of a panda. And maybe because I like this panda, I want to link to his Wikipedia website. Now, I know a lot, it feels like there's going to be like a lot of new tags just thrown at you all at once. And because maybe you're a complete beginner, you haven't seen these before. So I don't expect you to remember all of these all right away. It takes a long time to internalize it, but you always have resources at your disposal, and you have us to bounce questions off of, like, I forgot how to do this, right? That's a really important thing about coding. You don't have to memorize everything. You always have somewhere to look, some reference. So with that, here's another tag that you can use. It's called the anchor tag, and it's just represented by the letter A. Now this one does require a closing tag. And in between that, I'm just going to put some text. So I'm going to put, please visit my Wikipedia page, right? Now you see over here in the browser, we did display the text, but I can't click on it. This anchor isn't going anywhere, right? How would it know where to go? Because I didn't tell it where to go, right? So that's where we're going to use, once again, an attribute. Anchor tags have an attribute called an href, or a hypertext reference. You do not need to remember that right now. I just know that I'm going to post in some kind of reference that I want to redirect to if they click on that link. So I'm going to go over to Wikipedia, to the Giant Panda page. I'm going to copy that address with Control C. I'm going to go back to my Sandbox, and then inside the quotes, I'm just going to paste that directory, right? And now you'll see the link has actually gone live. And if we click on it, we are redirected to the Giant Panda Wikipedia page. So really, that's how links work in your website. Now, I don't like the fact that this is over here on the right side of the picture. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more new tag here. Let's call this BR. That stands for break. And this is another one of those self-closing tags because nothing really goes in it. All you're doing is telling the browser, I want a new line. And notice how when I type that in, this link jumped down to the next line. So hopefully you're starting to see just really simple elements going in here, these really simple tags, and they all just make the building blocks of how this page is constructed, okay? So after that anchor tag, well, let's do a little bit of CSS now. So we've done a couple HTML elements, right? And I think that's a good bit to start for this overview. How would CSS look? Remember, CSS is what we use for decorating or personalizing our page or whatever we want. So there's a couple different things I could do. But remember, the inline way is we give whatever element we want to change a style attribute. And then we put equals quotation mark. Now, anything I put in here, remember, I need a property and then something I want to modify the property. So let's do color first. So I'll type color, and then I'll put a colon. And notice the browser, the Code Sandbox text editor is actually giving me some suggestions on what I might want to put in. These are actually colors that HTML understands and would be able to interpret. You can also use hexadecimal values if you want. But I could use something like blue if I wanted. And if I click it, it turns that text blue. We do want to make sure we end that with a semicolon to keep it grammatically correct. That doesn't have to be blue. Maybe we want to change it to orchid, right? And now our text is changing. So whatever we want it to look like, we can be so creative in this respect. So maybe, here's a fun one. The whole entire body of this HTML document, maybe I want it to have a background color, right? So I'm going to give it a style attribute, just like I did with this. And I'm going to type the background color property. Maybe I want the entire thing to have a background of tan. I don't know. See if tan's in there. I don't know if you can see that one. Oh, guess that's not rendering. Sorry about that. Did I make a typo, Rich? This is the other fun. Oh, I think it's just the background property, not background color. I'm trying to think of what it is. Anyway, sorry, I would have to look it up because once again, you do not have to memorize everything. That's an important point, and I just illustrated it. I would have to look this up, and I don't want to waste your guys' time. So anyway, that was just me trying to be a little creative here. Maybe I want the H2 to be font size of, maybe I wanted it to be 50 pixels for some stupid reason. Look how big that text is now, right? So with one line of code, we can change how entire things look on our website and how they're displayed, okay? And I'll show you one more example. The image, I think maybe the image of the panda is just a little too big for my website, if you feel that it's too big. So I can go here, I can type style equals, open up some quotes, and I can do max width. Let's say I don't want this picture to be bigger than 200 pixels, okay? So right now it might look like I'm just typing random things, in these quotation marks. You're like, how are you getting all of these? This is all in the CSS reference guides, which I will point you to. You don't have to memorize this stuff. It's kind of like a dictionary of things you can do. You will memorize certain ones that you use a lot, but you don't by any means feel like learning the language means I have to learn every single combination of properties and values. It's very overwhelming. So like I said, let's just take a quick, see if anyone's got any questions. If anyone has any questions up to this point, please let me know. If I'm going too fast, let me know. If I'm going too slow, let me know. I will keep going on some JavaScript here just in a second. So let's jump down here underneath the anchor tag that gives us the Wikipedia link. I want to do something fun. So I'm going to put an H1 here. It says change picture. I want to give the user the ability to change the panda picture if they want to. So underneath that, I'm going to put a button element. If you remember from the JavaScript illustration, this will be very similar. We're going to put a button on the screen, and then we're going to close that tag. Okay. And now notice, oh, I forgot the input first. Hang on. We'll get to the button. There's a few more tags here. We have an input tag. An input tag is what users would input data into. You can have a text input, you could have a number input, you could have different kinds of user input. Like if you're entering your email address, that would actually be an input type email. That would be a text field looking for your email address. For now, we're just going to say we're going to say input type equals text. That means I could put any text into this input. Okay. The anchor, real quickly, because I just got a question, just one more time to reiterate. The anchor is a link tag. It tells me that I want there to be some kind of hyperlink. And so I'm putting a hyperlink to this Wikipedia reference. And then here is the actual text of the anchor tag before it closes. Does that make sense? And I can always feel free to contact me at the end if you got any other questions about stuff. We'll have more questions at the end. So yeah, we have an input type equals text. All right. And for right now, I'm going to give this an ID of URL. Okay, ID, another attribute that I haven't seen before. Don't get hung up on this yet. We're going to use it. Okay, just know that whatever you put in this input is going to have an ID of URL. So our JavaScript knows what to do with it. Okay, this can be a self-closing tag. Okay, so we're just going to put the /. All right, now notice we have this little text box just appeared for us, and we can type whatever we want into it. Pretty nifty. Okay. Now to the button that I was trying to do earlier. I'm going to add a button component and close it off. Now notice there is a button here, but it doesn't say anything. So anything I put in between these two tags is going to be the text displayed on the button. So maybe because I want this, eventually this button is going to change the picture, I will write change the picture. And that'll be what actually shows up on our button. Okay. So now I can click this all I want. Nothing's going to happen because it doesn't have anything. There's no functionality, right? Remember it from the example, we had what was called an on-click attribute. Okay. On-click attribute just tells this button what to do when you click on it. And here's where the JavaScript comes in. Now, I'm going to do my very best to explain this. It is very hard to get into the absolute nitty-gritty of JavaScript in 15 minutes, what I have right now. So for what I'm going to do now, I'm going to paste in the JavaScript function that I wrote a little bit ago. Okay. I'll explain it briefly, but if you don't understand it all at once, that's okay. all you need to know is on click, we're going to execute some function. We're going to change the picture. That's what I've called the function, change picture. And it's going to do it by going to the document, getting an element by its ID, sort of like grabbing an element. And remember when we had the URL ID up here? That means we're getting that ID URL and its value. So whatever you typed into here, we're going to send that information into a function called change picture. Okay? On click, you're taking whatever people typed into this input and sending it to change picture. Now, notice we don't actually have change picture written yet. If you remember from before in the PowerPoint, you had to use that keyword function. So I'm going to copy and paste one more thing over. Okay, and once again, if you don't understand this all the first time you're seeing it, that is okay. So here is the function. I'm putting it in a script tag. All that does is tell the browser, hey, this is some JavaScript. Okay, here's that function keyword. And we're naming it change picture, and we're going to pass in something called new image. Okay, this is what we're getting from this text box over here. We're going to pass that in to the function. And remember, we had that code block before. We want something to happen. Okay, we're going to get element by its ID. This time we're going to grab something called image. So something has to have an ID of image, and we're going to set its source attribute to new image. Okay, like I said, all these periods and all this document dot get element by ID dot set attribute, that's a handful. It's a lot to process right now. Don't overthink it right now. All I want you to realize is that with 2 lines of code here and 1 line of code here, we are going to be able to change one element of this website. We're going to change the picture to whatever we want it to be, which is pretty cool. Now I do notice that I actually did not give our image its ID. So I'm going to go back up to this image that I built, right? Now, just like I did with the input, I'm going to give it an ID attribute. And inside ID, I want to make sure that it matches this ID here. So I'm going to give it an ID of image. So that tells the JavaScript, when I'm looking for something on this website, I want to look for whatever it is called image. That's what I called it up here. It's a unique identifier. And I want to set a new source attribute so that it is no longer showing a panda. It's going to be showing whatever I tell it to show. So once again, if you didn't grab all that the first time, that is okay. We will get into JavaScript in the classes and spend a lot more time, and I can work with people on a more individual basis to grasp this stuff. I just want you to understand the simplicity of 3 lines of code changing a big part of the website. So for right now, it looks like I've set everything up the way I want it to. I'm going to make sure I refresh this. Okay. Now I'm going to go somewhere else on the internet, and I'm going to find a picture. So I pulled up Mario here, and I wanted to change that panda to a picture of Mario. So I'm going to right click it. I'm going to copy the image address. That's just going to put a URL in my clipboard. I'm going to go over to my website here, Control V, going to paste it in. So I now have this href to this PNG file of Mario. And what's going to happen when I click this button, if everything works the right way, it'll execute this function and change the picture of the panda. So that's how that works. So you put in a URL, the function passes in that URL and grabs our image and gives it a new source, which is pretty cool. So I can do it with Mario. I can do it with this whale I found, because maybe I want it to be a picture of a whale, right? So I can paste that in there, change the picture. So you can very quickly see how dynamic websites can be just with a couple lines of code. And this just brief overview of HTML, CSS, JavaScript is designed to kind of show you what's going on under the hood when you look at websites. So eventually you can use these principles and build your own applications, build your own websites, and just start to really be creative, because there's no limit to the kind of things you can do with this sort of stuff. So that's my main goal in this presentation. Like I said, you don't have to remember everything. I will post a link in the chat here. I'm going to share this sandbox so that you can actually grab this specific sandbox that I was working on. And if you want to go in and try changing some things, maybe you want to set the picture to whatever you want. Maybe you want to change some of the decoration. Maybe you want to add some tags, see if you can add some elements to the website. That would be up to you. So I'm just going to post that in the chat for you guys. And one more thing I'm going to post is a reference to a great website that if you're just starting out with web design or learning to code, w3schools.com is going to be your best friend. I use it all the time. And I'm specifically linking a page that has HTML tag references. So you can actually go through and check out some of the different tags that you might have on an HTML page. You might have an iframe. Those let you put videos up on websites. You might have some forms. You might have an ordered list. If you've ever seen like a numbered list, you would have an OL tag. So stuff like that. This is just a quick get you started reference guide. And we'll be using this site a lot. I'm going to be showing you how to use these tools, how to use the sandbox, how to use online references for whatever you're looking for. So that concludes the presentation on HTML, CSS, JavaScript.